All right. Well, welcome. I am so excited to be hanging out with these two amazing gentlemen to talk about this amazing book, Stitching Freedom, the true story of injustice, defiance, and hope in Angola prison by the one and only Gary Tyler. Thank you, Gary Tyler, for joining us. Ellen Bravo also contributed to this amazing book. It's wonderful to be with you. I will let you introduce yourself as well as Dr. Jared Ball.
Hello, my name is Garrett Tyler, and it's an honor to be on this station in the morning because I don't usually be up early. But however, felt it was important to be here tonight, this morning. So I appreciate having the opportunity to engage with both of you.
No, right on. And it's an honor to be virtually meeting you, Mr. Tyler, and to be back in some work with my favorite long-standing comrade, Soul Rebel. So I look forward to this discussion. It's an honor. Greetings.
Yes, indeed. Well, we'll get right into it. The book is coming out, or the book should be out, October 7th, and it falls on a very important anniversary. Do you want to tell us what that is, Mr. Tyler?
Well, it's going to be the 52nd year of the incident that happened in my case back in 1974. Back when there was forced busing in Louisiana, a small town called Destrehan, where a horrible incident happened, where I was falsely accused of killing a classmate. And later, you could say charged with first-degree murder, tried as an adult, and sentenced, to death, where my date was May 1st, 1976, execution date. But of course, later, the United States Supreme Court ruled in Stanislaw Roberts versus Louisiana that the implementation of the death penalty in Louisiana and several other southern states was unconstitutional. And that was one of the decisions that overturned, you could say, the sentencing phase of my conviction, not the guilt phase. So.
I want to, start off by saying it saddens me to hear all of that, even though it's almost like an historical occurrence at this point. But it makes me feel emotional just hearing you say it. How do you feel when people congratulate you on being released?
Well, I feel a sense of, you could say, vindication, because we're talking about a struggle that have lasted for over 4 decades. And the support around my case never died. That was so important. And I felt that I had an obligation and commitment to stay strong, to keep up with my health while in prison, because there were people who have literally sacrificed their lives to win my freedom. And having to get out and meeting a lot of these people personally for the first time was amazing. Because we're talking about 42 years in prison and having people come and introduce themselves to you and say, listen, you may not remember who I am, but I am the one who had prayed for you. I'm the one who had sent letters, signed petitions in your behalf. I'm the one who had been part of demonstrations and protests demanding your release. So, I mean, it's fulfilling knowing that I was able to walk out of prison and meet the very forces that helped made it possible. So yes, I mean, it was definitely a feeling of vindication and support, having people, coming up and introduce themselves to me.
Thank you for sharing that. As I read the book, Stitching Freedom, I felt like as a reader, it took me on a journey from your innocence to awakening that you are actually in a system, and understanding the system help you to survive that part of your experience. Um, but you tell me, does understanding the system help you survive it or escape it, or what is understanding that you were in a system and still, I would imagine, still in a system?
Yeah.
What has that meant for you?
Well, this acknowledges enlightenment. It gives you a chance to be able to understand and be able to decipher and analyze what's around you. And you're talking about at that time an immature 16-year-old kid who wasn't politically, acute to the system itself, whether it was political, criminal, whatever. So mainly, you're talking to someone who was mainly in the dark at the time, but having to enter the prison system, being able to meet the men who at one time or another been a part of the civil rights movement, who were members of SNCC, um, Black Panther Party, and various other Black revolutionary and social movements in our community. Those guys were the one that gave me this flashlight. I always say that, you know, when someone walking around and blindly, they more apt to bumping against things that they don't see because they're in the dark. But when you in the light, you see things ahead of you before you even get near it. So you're not blind. And I use, and I say the flashlight because they're the ones that help turn that switch in my mind, let me know, say, you know, this is what happening to you. Now it's up for you to be able to analyze it, study it, and be able to deal with it. Because you're not going to be able to deal with your problem effectively if you don't know if you don't know anything about the criminal justice system. And that's what happened. And thanks to those brothers, they are the ones that educated me, made it possible. And that enabled me to be able to effectively deal with the precarious situation that I was in.
Thank you. Jared?
No, sure. So if you don't mind, obviously we want everybody to get the book when it comes out. I'm awaiting my pre-order, but just working through sort of the press packet that we got, and some of the which is fairly thorough, at least in introducing me to your story. I am wondering if you could talk a little bit about that initial charge. You know, because reading the summary, that at 16 you're accused of ultimately first degree murder of a 13-year-old classmate,
Yes.
uh and then you go in, like we hear so often, you go in for questioning, and as you point out, never come back out for 40 some years.
Yeah.
Could you talk at least a little bit about what happened, or what was said to have happened, uh, uh, that started this whole nightmare off?
Yes. Well, back in early 1970s, we was during a time of busing and integration. And in the South, they didn't take that too well. So we were bused in the middle of a white neighborhood where the schools was at, because they closed the black schools in the near black communities. And we were not welcome. So you just can imagine having the community coming out in protest against black kids arriving at the school and stuff like that. So it kept a lot of racial tension going on at that time. So unfortunately, there was an incident that happened October the 4th at a football game where there was a racial, you could say, fight that happened, and rumor word that it was going to continue the following Monday. Now, we're talking about from Friday all the way to Monday. Things tend to cool down. That's, hey, it was a fight that Friday. So when when October 7th came that Monday, of course, I mean, we heard about the rumor, but hey, I mean, every day was just, I mean, racial conflict at the school. So it wasn't anything new to us at the time. And it's sad that, young people have to live up under those conditions, especially, not by being rejected and then the school teachers rejecting you and not giving proper attention to try to educate you at the time. Instead of having you sitting separate from the white students while you're in the classroom. Nonetheless, that Monday, I went to school and not so much thinking about what happened Friday or the rumor that was going on. So after, 10 minutes or 10 to 15 minutes off the bus, I hear my name being mentioned over the intercom. Gary Tyler and John Lee report to the principal's office. So in my mind, I said, wow, what they calling me for? And I wasn't part of any conflict at the school. So as I was going to the principal's office, that's when the social worker stopped me and said, Gary, what they calling you for? I said, I don't know. She said, listen, she said, if they question you about Friday, you let them know I was the one that brought you to the football game and made sure that you made it home that night, in which case that was the truth. And so as I went to the principal's office, the guy, John Lee, he was exiting, and him and the principal had word because the principal told him, he said, man, you suspended me from school for what? So the principal told him, says, you leave the school grounds, I'm going to call the police on you, get you arrested. So the guy left. So that's when he saw me and told me to come in the principal's office. So I went to the principal's office and he told me, say, Gary Tyler, I'm suspending you for 3 days because the teachers reported that you caused problems in the classroom and you're never there. So when he said that, I said, wait a minute. I said, how can I cause problems in the classroom if I'm never there? Right there, I mean, I caught him in a lie, and he knew I caught him in a lie. So he looked and he said, well, I'm suspending you, and you bring, when you come back, bring your parents, the report we're gonna have with me. So I said, just like that. He said, yes. So I said, okay, before I leave, can you make sure I have a pass where I can show my parents that I was suspended 3 days? So that's when he told the secretary to keep writing out, a suspension pass. So I got that, and I left. I left the school grounds, and I made a hitchhike on the river road along with, you could say, John Lee. We made it there, and the guy that I knew in the community, he had got a job, and he asked me to come with him to New Salt Peak. That's another small community, black community, in St. Charles Parish. And we went there, and we got on the river road to hitchhike, and a PE teacher from the local middle school picked us up and told he wasn't going no further than Red and White store. He dropped us off, and as soon as we got back on the river road, an unmarked police car appeared and stopped, and this guy, you could say plain clothes, DJ St. Pierre, jumped out and started shaking us down, patting us down, see if we had any weapons and stuff like that. And asked us where we were going. So we said we were, going the same roads. So he told us to get in this car, and he turned, when he turned around in his seat, he leaned over and started going ruffling through the bags that the guy had. And he asked, he said, Gary Tyler, what you doing out of school? I said, I was suspended. And I said, here goes the suspension slip right here. He snatched it out of my hands. We arrived on the school grounds. They saw the assistant principal and asked him, were we the ones that they called the police on? So the principal looked and he said, no, he said, Gary Tyler was suspended this morning, so he shouldn't be on the school grounds. And soon when he said that, that's when the police said, get the effing out of his patrol car. So I said, you're not gonna bring us, you're not gonna bring us home? So he said, no, get the F out of the police car. So we got out, and at that time you could see the buses arrive and come pick up kids. So we knew that something happened, and it is evident that there was that closed, or at least shut down classes. So the guy and I, since I had my brother Terry at school along with my cousins, I said, well, I'm gonna go look for them and make sure that they make it home. And that's what he said about his little brother. And as soon as we turned the bend, that's when we could see all the black kids in front of the gym. So we got there and the police immediately ushered us on the bus. We think now, okay, we're gonna take 76. That's the bus normally go to St. Rose, but they put us on 91, even though it go to St. Rose, but it served the kids on Turtle Creek, not Mockingbird. So they put us on the bus, but at the time you can see each and every bus that passed that go down this road, it came under attack by a white mob. And so we kind of braced saying, okay, that we should expect this. They're gonna attack us. So soon as the bus was proceeding, sure enough, you start hearing the objects hitting the bus. Next thing you know, like objects just raining on the bus and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, you hear pop sound. Kids on the bus, they panic. Pandemonium hit, and as though that there was some kids said that they're shooting at us. So kids start rushing to the front and stuff like that. And that's when the bus driver, who's a Korean veteran, Kojo, he got off the bus, and soon as he stepped off, that's when the police told him to get on the bus, and he got back. They told him to drive it on Destrehan Drive, so he did that, and that's when the police came on the bus, and they told everybody to stay in their seat. Of course, I mean the bus was overcrowded, so we had kids standing all in the aisle and everything. People sitting in each other's laps and things like that, because that's how much they they took and piled the bus up. And one by one, they started taking us off. Then when they got to me, they patted me down, and I had to jump the ditch because they had a vacant lot they was putting everybody in. So I jumped across the ditch. As soon as I turned around, because I knew that my cousin and brothers, they was behind me, the police pulled my cousin Ike aside and was arresting him because he had a chain with a 22 bullet on it. And I asked him, what's going on? He said they arresting him for this. I said, they can't arrest you for that. Nothing illegal about that. And I said, excuse me, officer. I said, you didn't tell me anything about the change that bullet what I had with the chain around my neck. And that's when he told me to come back across the ditch. As I proceeded to jump across the ditch, that's when the police drew their guns on me. All right. And then I went to complaining, telling them that you pointed a gun at me, and this guy told me to jump across the ditch. And that police officer just stood there, said nothing. He didn't intervene or anything. All right. And I'm there, now I'm getting upset. Here they done arrested my cousin. Here they done drew the guns down on me. And I'm telling them, if the gun go off, don't say there was an accident, because they got too many kids out just seeing that you directly pointing the gun at me. And then that's when this lone officer walked up and he says, son, what is your problem? I said, young people don't have a filter. They're very smart. Very smart, it's called, as they say, smart mouth. And my response was, I have a father, and I see my father every day. And he looked at me, and he didn't like my response. And he said, son, I am arresting you for disturbing the peace and interfering in the police officer's duty. And he grabbed me, and now this is a tall guy. He grabbed me, kind of like lifted me up, and he brought me to his patrol car, put me in the car, and told his officer to watch me. And that's when kids that knew me, they came, they asked the officer what they was arresting me for, and that's when the officer told them that, well, for disturbing the peace. Then black female that I knew, Karen Shack, she said, Gary, you didn't have anything to do with the shooting. I said, no, She said, somebody got shot. Now that was the first time I heard that somebody got shot. All right, and you could say, fast forward, they brought me to the substation. The guy, Uric Smith, who that they picked up with me on a river road, they had arrested him. The same officer that arrested me arrested him for calling him Uncle Tom. And another officer, you understand, Michael, he arrested him for calling him an Uncle Tom. So when they brought me in the substation, they put me in a room with me, Uric Smith, and the officer started to write a report on Uric. Then when he got to me, he asked me, well, my name and how old I was. So I told him I said I was 16 years of age, and that's when he went ballistic. Initially, he started writing me up as though I was an adult. But when I told him I was 16 years old, he started cursing me out, telling me why I didn't tell him I was a juvenile. And I told him you didn't ask me. And one thing led to another. He left out the office. And then that's when the police officer who brought us to the school, he come in there along with the other officer and a few other officers. They saw us. And that's when he said, why didn't y'all go home when I told y'all to go home? I told him that we was heading home. He said, you understand? And they looked at each other and everything. And that's when BJ St. Pierre, the officer, he started beating me. And other officers joined him and beating me. And they told, BJ St. Pierre told the officer to move this other guy out the room, to bring him to another room. Now you could see the fear in this guy's face that he's afraid that they're gonna bring him in the other room and beat him. So that's when the officer said, give me something to beat this mother effing in. I mean, he just, he was unhinged. And the same officer who had arrested me, in which case he was a black officer. And he said, only thing I have is this flapjack. You want this? And most, every black person know what a flapjack is because they encounter with police officer. This guy gave this officer that, and this officer went to beating me constantly, and other officers joining in. And then that's when another officer entered the room and said, listen, hold up, y'all gonna have to calm down because the mothers in the lobby can hear what's going on. So that's when they decided to move me to another room. And but in order to get me to the back room, they had to go through the lobby. And as they was toting me, in which case they literally and figuratively, they was toting me, because I was this little, light kid. I probably didn't weigh no more than 100 pounds. And as we were going through the lobby, guess who eyes I locked on was my mother. Now I can see the petrification in each and every black mother in that lobby. But when I saw my mother, it was like, it was my child that they was beating in that room, because the mothers could hear the beating. They could hear me screaming and hollering, you understand, in the room. And when I exited, I was blooded and everything. At that time, they literally tore the clothes off me. And when they was bringing me to the back room, my mother went to scream, said, please, can I talk to anyone? Mister. And that's when the officer responded, said that I don't want anyone, I don't want to talk to no one until I find out who murdered my cousin. And they brought me in the back room and they proceeded to beat me over and over and over and over. And they got to the point where I became quite numb. And, and they, so it was a thing where then all of a sudden they started to play good cop, bad cop, and good cop. So they send a black officer to talk to me to find out what did I know and who did I feel that I probably was responsible for. And I told them, I don't know. I don't know anything. You understand? And they tried to get me to sign a statement against myself. I refused. And the bad cop, which case, come back in, threatening me, and they proceeded to beat me again. And then that's when he asked me about how old I was. So I told him again, and they told me to call my mother, tell her to send my birth certificate and the clothes that I had, in which case I did. And when my mother came and my father, you know, you know, as a kid, you always look for your parents for protection. You always depend on them. And my father was a hard working man to support his family. And when my father saw me, he was helpless. My father, I mean, he shook his head. He couldn't do anything, you know. And my mother, I mean, she was really hurt because she saw what dad did me. And that's when my mother, walked up to me and just went to touching me, and everywhere she touched, I was complete pain. So that night, I didn't go home. Later, they charged me with first degree murder. They lied to the paper, saying that I made a confession, and they never gave me any medical treatment for the beating, and they kept me separate from from our family, except my mother and father. They were the only one that were able to visit me. So for a whole month and a half, I laid in a parish jail and and mended without any medical assistance, whatever. So and then the grand jury came back. They indicted me for first degree murder, and uh, and later they tried me for murder and found me guilty of first degree murder, and automatically I got the death penalty. And in which case, I mean, I never thought it would have gotten that far because I knew I was innocent, and I felt that the truth would prevail. But unfortunately, it did not. And they sentenced me to death, to where at least they scheduled to say an execution date, and that was May 1st, 1976. So and they transferred me to Angola, and that's when I was reintroduced into a whole nother world and didn't know anybody. Never phantom of ever going to that place because you hear so much about the prison, Angola, one of the worst prisons in the nation. I mean, you hear about murder, rape, or I mean, complete, mayhem. And when I entered that prison, I already had those fears. You understand that every man that I saw at the time, they were dangerous. These are men that I heard so much about. And lo and behold, despite the facade of these individuals, those individuals was angels to me. They was my guardian. These individuals were men, despite the lives that they lived in prison, despite their political and social affiliation or background. These men saw me not as a threat. These men saw me, you understand, possibly could be their son, because many of them was old enough to be my father and little brother, you understand, as well as nephew. And these men, they galvanized and they put their differences aside to assure my survival. And they gave me the best of themselves. And they helped me. They're the one that helped educate me. They're the ones that took their time to make sure that while I was there, that I was going to be able to understand not only my situation, but also how corrupt and racist the criminal justice system as well as, the country itself. So they're the ones that gave me the best of themselves and never asked anything in return. So thanks to them, they gave me the survive, they gave me the tools to survive, and I am here today to give my testimony.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Uh, so Rebel, I don't know if you wanted to jump in. The one sort of follow up to that I was reading in the press packet is that some of the men that became, as you say, your guardian angels, are people that to some of us we've only known sort of indirectly through the heroic tales of the Black Panther Party and political prisoner,
Yes,
those who follow political prisoners, and it seems like at least two of the Angola three were mentioned, if I've read that correctly, as those who became part of your uh,
right. Herman Wallace and Albert Woodfox, and then later Robert Wilkerson, brother they called King,
right.
right?
Uh,
And
yeah. If you wouldn't mind just say maybe a word or two about them in particular,
yes,
and yeah,
and you know, I walked in the place, as I say, not knowing anyone, but people kept up knowing, they knew about what happened to me. So really, they were kind of like waiting, knowing that I was coming to prison because of what happened. And it's amazing how guys are able to network with each other in prison, because the word got out that I had just arrived in Angola, and that it was going to put me on death row, and the tier that they put me on was on a C tier, and they put me in cell 8. And as I said, that when I arrived, I didn't know anybody, and I had this mindset that everybody was dangerous. All right, everyone was dangerous, and when I went on the tier, every cell I pass, I can see these guys. You understand? And how these guys looked. And it's like some of these guys, they was bred for war. You know? These guys was hard. And when I got in cell, that's when one by one, some of these guys start coming out, and they introduced themselves to me, who they were, and things like that. And when they did that, they humanized themselves. They became individuals. They became a person. Unlike me having this misunderstanding about these guys was like this and everything. Later, I realized that these are the individuals that the prison system feared. These individuals are the ones who was working to try to change the mindset of the men in prison. And that's where I was introduced to brother like Colonel Niadibo, who was one time served time with Jesse, John George Jackson in San Quentin. But later he escaped because he was part of the fire, you say crew that they had, out here in California, they taken used prisoners as firefighters. But he was one time part of that, and he escaped. And he got caught for armed robbery in Louisiana, in which case he was normally from Sweetport, but he was there. Bagalat, he was a part of SNCC, the civil rights movement, and he was part of the you can say black nationalist movement, right? And then that's when I got this kite, and this kite is a letter that I got from Albert Woodfox. I read it, and he told me who he was. And I get another one from Herman Wallace, the brother we call Hooks, Gerald Bryan. So I started getting kites from these guys in here, and they was telling me who they were and what they were in you can say in CCR. So I realized that these are guys that the prison considered incorrigibles, that there was a threat to security there and stuff like that. Yes, of course, you had other prisoners who was there for unspeakable acts, in which case in Angola, they have this rule that if you enter prison, what they do, they initiate you Someone will walk up to you and they will give you a shank. That's a knife, a prison knife. And if you refused to take that knife, you fail that litmus test because now they know that you're weak. So you easy to get, and you're gonna have problems. But if you take that knife and someone get out of line and you use that knife, then they know one thing: you're a man. You're gonna take and defend yourself. So those are the little games that many people play. So I knew guys who came there young, and some failed, and some lived up, you understand, to that test. And unfortunately was forced to take the lives of other men while they was in prison. And I'm fortunate and blessed that the men that came into my life prevented me having to go through that. You understand? Because several days after being on death row in maximum security, there was this horrible incident that happened where a prisoner set another prisoner on fire with gasoline. How can I protect myself? I don't even know the system, the culture there, and this guy is being being set afire. So how can I protect myself from something like that? So right there, I knew that I couldn't think as a child. I couldn't act as a child. I can no longer be a child. I had to start thinking as a man, immediately grow up as a man, and take into account the things that goes on around me. And that's what those guys was able to do. Help me to adapt. You understand? Help me to be able to survive. And one thing they always told me, your focus and objective is to get out of prison. They believed in my innocence, and they're the ones that told me, in which case Albert Woodfox told me this, and I'll never forget. He said, Gary, I know you want to go home. I know you hear bad. I know you want to, you want your freedom, but understand one thing. You are not free until you free your mind. And that's what he told me. Until you free your mind. Because right now you captive. You don't understand. You're walking in darkness. But once you enter the light, then you'll be able to see your future and what's ahead of you. That's what the brother shared.
Yeah, right on. Thank you.
Wow, thank you for sharing. I mean, I feel almost speechless, to be honest with you.
You know,
You went through all of that.
yes, and these brother was the one who convinced me after almost 10 years of being in the cells to leave because they had been in the cells 8 to 10 years already when I arrived in Angola. And when it was time for them to release me, I didn't want to go because these guys was my family. And I didn't want to be separate from them. And it took the guy to tell me, say, Gary, I've been in these cells almost a decade before you come to prison. And if I was given an opportunity to leave, they said I would leave. I would leave the cells. He said, since you've been in Angola, you've been in the cell. You need to get out. You need to grow. You need to see how things are. And they said, besides, if you don't like it down and walk in the main prison, they'll send you back. Because they were having protests and demonstration at the front gate of the prison about free Gary Tyler. You understand? It's save Gary Tyler life. So it was a thing where the prison officials, they knew about my case and things like that, and the pressure was on that here I've been resentenced to life, and then they confined me into maximum security. So it was then that they was inhumanely treating me. You understand? Because of what? Because of the charge that I had. So the guys told me, said, Gary, give yourself a chance. So, me, I said, you're right. If I don't like what's going on down there, I will be back. And do you know, I never went back. Not being confined, I went back to visit. And but those guys, they literally prepared me to deal with prison. They gave me the tools to effectuate change in a general prison population. Because once I made it down there, then that's when I started applying the things that they shared with me, that they instilled in me. And as time passed, I became a hospice volunteer. I was one for 17 and a half years. And now these very guys who took their time to help me, I'm in a position to help them on their dying bed and have these guys to tell me how proud they were of me because they felt they saved my life. And at the same time, they felt a sense of redemption that they did something good in their lives. They stood up as men and make sure that whatever happened in prison, it doesn't happen to me. And I sit here and tell you that my life was never threatened. I mean, of course, I had problems with the guards, but that eventually subsided. But never had conflict with prisoners to the point where my life was in jeopardy. I had men come to me, apologize to me for things that I never knew. Guys used to tell me, man, one time I didn't like you. I hated you. But they say that I sat back and I observed, and I see that everything you do, you're always helping other prisoners. Listen, I want to apologize to you, man, for even thinking ill will about you. Because every time I see you, you always working with these guys in here. So it was a thing where I just only was giving back what these guys gave me. Mm-hmm. And that helped me, stay, I guess, to not only adjust, be able to adapt to time itself, because in the education building, they had this sign, you always go up, and that sign said, don't do time, let time do you. And you know that as human beings, we can never keep up or outdo time. Time is infinite. The best thing that we can do is utilize time to our advantage. And that's what I did. My time that I spent to help other men. But at the same time, it was therapeutic for myself of helping myself, knowing that I was doing something relevant. Because in prison, you always work to become, to maintain your relevancy, your humanity in prison. And that's what I did.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing. I was really moved by your telling of how these brothers were there for you. Yeah. And how, they took care of you and how you cared for each other. And we don't see enough of that represented in the popular media, in art or anything like that. Why do you think that is?
It's because this myth that have been constantly, you can say, pushed, that the absence of Black men in the community, Black men not taking responsibility for their children, you understand? In which case, yes, there's absentee, you understand, of Black men, but but the fault don't necessarily lies within them, because some Black men in prison for economic crimes, but they were trying to support their family. They were trying to do what's right. But how could you do what's right when the criminal justice system, you understand, constantly haunts you like a hound dog? You understand? Like you always trying to run from the slave master or the slave catcher. You understand? That no matter what you do, if you go to prison for something small or you get locked up for something small, that's something you'll never overcome because you are not guaranteed a second chance in life. And if you want, you understand, a man to be productive where he can give back in his community, give him a chance, give him an honest chance. You understand? Because I met men in prison, given that second chance, they never came back to prison and they became productive while they were out there on the streets and still on the streets today. So it's a thing where the system hinders the progression in our community. You understand? True. Black women, they can't do it alone. But when you have a system that works to keep us separated, as though they, you know what I'm saying, that black man is not, I mean, he's indispensable, that you don't need him. You know what I'm saying? I mean, what it does is it breaks down the dynamics of our community. You know what I'm saying? Because when I was growing up, I remember having older guys. See, when we was up to no good, they pulled us aside and told us, look, come on. They talked to us. They spent time with us. Come on, let's go play football. Let's go play basketball. Let's go play baseball. You understand? What are your interests? Those men, they have gotten older and they died off. And the young, you know what I'm saying, and the young men today, they don't have those mentors. They don't have those big brothers in the community. And you have young kids leading each other. You know what I'm saying? And it's a thing where a young person shouldn't have to grow or learn by making fatal mistakes in their lives. You understand? Because of lack of knowledge. When you have someone there to tell them, listen, don't do that. This is the consequences behind it. And what you're looking at is that you're looking at an individual who had went to prison. Learn from my experience. Learn from my mistakes. We don't have people like that to do that anymore. You understand? So that's one of the biggest problems. And I tell guys all the time, I used to work with reentry. Lead by example. Don't lead where an individual saying that, oh, he been to the big house, he been to prison, so he's someone to glorify. No, you don't want them to glorify your past or you've been to prison. When I got out, I worked at a program on the condition that no one need to know my background. I want the kids to get to know me organically, as though they meeting me for the first time. And when the kids did find out about me, it didn't change their perspective because it was a thing where they knew that my heart, I had genuine, I had genuine concern about them. I took my time with them just like I did with those young men in prison. So it's a thing where I work with them. And I feel that, and that's what we need. We need older, older brothers, black men to work with young men in our communities. Our community, our young men in the community, they are salvageable. They are not indispensable. I mean, they are not exposable. We need to take our time with them. Understand? And so it's a thing where true, there's a disconnect. Understand? And I feel that, we, no matter what, I feel we're gonna overcome this. We always have. We overcome these monumental odds that's against us. But we got to put some work in our community. I think that's what that's what we need to do because we can rectify this this problem that we have in our community. But we can't depend on people outside of our community because it's always about punishment. Everything is not about punishment. When Nelson Mandela spent the time he did in prison, he didn't come out with vengeance. What he did, he came out with truth and reconciliation. You understand? And I feel that our community need to heal. And we need to do that with our community. We don't need to implement these draconian rules and policies that is being instituted in this country to suppress and destroy our community. We do not need that because it just only divide and destroy our community and corrupt the minds of the youth of our community. We need to let them. We need to let them know about the civic responsibility that they have to our community. We have that. We just need to understand, or you know, teach that again. We need to let our kids know that you're responsible. You're responsible for, you understand, for your brothers and sisters, your siblings in your community. We need to do that. It's not hard. It's not hard. I mean, we done took on a lot and we survived it. And we can survive this, you know. And I always tell people, they said, how you was able to make it? I was able to make it because it's in my DNA. Our ancestors survived for 100 years of slavery. It's in us, no matter what. And to have me confined for 4 decades in Angola. Angola is a former slave plantation, one of the largest in the Northern Hemisphere. Can you imagine? That plantation was there. It was to break Black people, and they survived. And through the spirit of our ancestors, that got me here. If they were able to live through that, I was able to live through the 4 decades that I spent in Angola. I
Real
know the
talk.
power. Yeah, that's all.
Real talk. Have you ever considered leaving the country, a country that allowed a child to experience what you did?
Say that again.
Have you ever considered leaving the country that allowed a child to experience what you did?
Yes, yes, I have. And as I always tell people, I consider myself one spoke in the wheel. We all play a part. And if we fall weak, the other spokes fall in to keep that wheel balanced. But if we all give in, that wheel what? That wheel going to wobble and they're going to eventually give in. So we all have have an important role to play. And I just want my book to serve as a testament that if I'm able to survive what I went through, that they can too. Understand? And I'm not the only one who have been through things like this. They got others. Understand? And I feel that it's imperative to tell my story because what about these untold stories that's out there? We need to tell these stories. We shouldn't allow tragedies to happen in our community go unspoken. We shouldn't do that. Because when we do that, then we are denied and deprived of our past, of our history.
That's right.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler. I appreciate it. Um, JB, I don't know if you have any question. I'm going to ask Mr. Tyler about some music.
Oh yeah, no, I'm definitely wanting to hear about that, about the artwork, etc. So yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. Let's elaborate on that.
Well, I host a reggae show, so I know that you're a legend in reggae music. Thanks to
Yeah.
UB40 and a bunch of other folks. And how did you feel when you first heard that track, or when you first heard about that some guys in England put together a reggae tune about your life?
Hold up for a second.
All right.
This is
I'm glad that you mention that because
Wow.
Yes.
I was
Wow.
I was at the concert last night.
Oh, you
Oh,
were.
wow.
They played the song Tyler.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
That is awesome.
Yes. They played the song Tyler.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
That is really cool. Love it. Love it. Yes, we can see it real clear.
Yes.
Very nice. Very
Right.
nice.
And
Yes.
I had a quite endearing,
Mhm.
time with them, and I thank them just like you know I thank everyone who have played a very important role in my freedom. And people say, why it took 40 years?
Mhm.
I said, I said, I'm not a religious man, but I am a spiritual man. Why did it took Moses 40 years, understand, to do the desert? Why people? I said, because that was a what? I said that during those 40 years, it was a cleansing period to where those who learn and adapt the ways of the slave master, or you say the Egyptian, that those eventually died out while the new came in. And I said, and it took some time to where the mindset of those who was responsible for sending me to prison, I said they eventually what? Eventually got old, died off, or what? Had them change their mind.
Mhm.
So, but I think that I feel strongly it's the prayers and moral support that I got from people. And out of those 40 years, I utilized those 40 years to the best of my ability. And it made me who I am today. Made me steel-willed, and it made me sensitive and caring because I didn't lose my humanity.
Mhm.
I told them, and like I tell everybody else, that if I have to live my life all over again, I wouldn't want to do it because I'd have met some fantastic, wonderful people in
Mhm.
my journey. That I just can't go through life ever thinking that forgetting about those people and what they did to help me because they kept my case alive. They kept it alive. And that gave me the energy to maintain because when I went to prison young. My grandparents was alive. My mother and father was alive. All my siblings was living. The most dreaded thing you can go through when you start losing your loved one and you can't do nothing about it. You can't even be there for them. And that's what happened. I lost my grandparents. I lost my father. Then I lost my mother. The very woman who was there for me. The very woman who saw how these people beated me in that substation. The very woman who told me, son, you got to maintain. You can't give up no matter what. If I die today or tomorrow, you got to continue to struggle. You got to hold up. You cannot give up under no circumstances. And the same woman on her dying bed told my siblings, don't forget my son in prison. That's what the words of my mother to my brothers and sisters. Don't give up on my son in prison.
Just quickly, how yeah, that's harrowing to hear about. But just back to the sillier side of things for a second.
Yeah.
The other overlap with the number 40 and this band UB40
Yeah. And Gil
and
Scott Heron and
but well, just quickly, many of us who don't have the expertise in the genre that Soul Rebel do, like would only know that UB40 for that one, Red Red Wine track, maybe one or another
yeah,
track. Like how did this band become the crew that ended up linking up with you and becoming playing at least some important role in keeping your case alive and your eventual freedom?
Well, let me start off by saying this. During the time of desperation where I needed help, my mother appealed to Gail Scott Heron. And Gail Scott Heron wrote the song about Angola, about me. And that song became international, an international cry. And UB40 was one of those groups that felt that they had to come out and they had to speak about the injustice that happened to my case. You know, they did their work.
Yeah, no, I just find in some ways, to some of us will feel kind of
Yes.
particularly random. Like Gil Scott Heron, that makes sense.
Yes.
That there's a logic. There's a clearer logic to that. No disrespect to UB40. I'm just confessing my own ignorance.
Of
I'm
course
just saying,
not.
like I
Of
was,
course,
that was just,
no. What they did, they picked up the baton and moved it forward. You understand? They moved it forward because they recognized an injustice. They heard the cry of Gary Tyler. Just like Deaf Generation, that's a rap group out of New Orleans. You can say the Neville Brothers. You know, they're the ones, like I say, that they was real stunt supporters of mine out in New Orleans. So it was a thing, and music have a way of touching the soul of people. And they use their talent to get the word out about the incarceration, the unjust incarceration and imprisonment of Gary Tyler.
That's right.
Yep, yeah. That's what they did.
And speaking of music, art, you're an artist.
Yes, I mean, it was, I would say I kind of like stumbled into that. But when I was on death row, I saw this brother in a cell. And what had amazed me was that this guy was building a boat out of matchsticks. This guy, you understand, was making picture frames out of matchsticks. And not only that, he was making picture frames and jewelry boxes out of matchsticks and cigarette packs. And that got my attention. But this was this guy's way of doing time, passing time, doing something creative. And I asked him about that. And he told me that this was his moment of peace. This was his way of staying relevant, as I mentioned earlier, about doing things to stay relevant. And he showed me how to make picture frames, jewelry boxes out of cigarette packs, as well as matchsticks. So I started doing little things myself. But fast forward, I became a hospice volunteer. And the idea came up about what could we do to raise funds for the program. So we have kicking ideas and everything. So one guy said, what about if we make quilts to sell? And of course, oh yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah, let's do that. But that wasn't my intention because, I mean, to help them, because, in prison, in a way, kind of like want to maintain an image. And Gary Tyler making quilts, they even questioned me when I used to have dreadlocks. When I cut my dreadlocks, they thought that I was losing my mind. Brother, are you all right? Can we talk about it? You know me, bro. We could have talked about that before you went that far. They questioned me about that. So can you imagine them questioning me about, say, brother, you all right? You making quilts? And they're kind of like feminine, too feminine for you. But um, it was something that happened at the hospital where they closed the quilting shop down at the prison hospital. So the guys who were doing the quilts, they needed a place to continue because the rodeo was coming up. So I told them, come on to the wheelchair shop because I was over the wheelchair shop because I took care of I repaired the wheelchairs and the beds for the patients at the hospital. So I told them, come on now. So they came down and made space for them. They started making quilts. And then fast approaching was the rodeo. So they asked me to help them. I was, I don't know, bro. I said, I got things to do. I got the drama club. I got to tend to. I got my job. I got a hospice. I got a patience. Making up all kind of excuses not to be a part of this. Until one day they said, man, we really need your help, Gary. I said, okay, I want you to know, man, I'm just, we ain't gonna make this a habit. So I told them, we ain't gonna make this a habit. So they said, look, just do this. So they start showing me how to cut material and they showed me how to use the sewing machine. And you know what? When I saw what I was doing and how I was putting pieces together, I was feeling good about it. And I had this epiphany. Gary, wait a minute. Remember when you was this little kid, when you were visiting your grandmother and she had this old Sears sewing machine where she used to sit behind with this foot pedal, this old foot pedal sewing machine, and that she was making blankets and she was using like moss hanging from a tree, newspapers, clothing, croaker sacks, you understand? And she was making blankets back then. And your mother was a seamstress. She was making clothing for herself and your sisters. So this really is in your DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to really warming up to it. And I said, wait a minute. I said, I feel good about this. By me being a graduate of graphic art, I learned printing. And in printing, they teach you about applique. And I said, I wonder if I can use that into quilting. And sure enough, oh, wait a minute. Oh yeah, I can do this. And I really embraced it. I really started making quilts and I said, wait a minute, what if I do this? When you get into something, you go to experimenting about how things will work and stuff like that. And next thing you know, I took on the responsibility of doing the signature quilts for the rodeo, and then we started entering quilts in for competition. And when the women found out that it was men from Angola that made these quilts, they said, "Oh no, they couldn't believe that. They wanted to come to prison and see the men in Angola."
That's right.
So they came to Angola, and sure enough, their mind was blown away. So they said, "There's anything we can do, let us know. Make a wish list." We start writing things down, and they started helping us. And next thing you know, we start getting material and stuff from off the streets, and I was making quotes, the signature quotes for the rodeo. And when I got out of prison, I kind of like put that behind me because you're talking about an individual who's been in prison for a long time, realizing that when I exited prison, I was 57 years old. I didn't have no social security. I had to learn how to support myself. And I was in a place to where I had to adjust. I had to get a job. I had to learn how to pay rent, pay bills, all of these things that most people take for granted. Unfortunately, many people don't want to pay bills. I've worked so hard and inflation is so high, and I don't have nothing left. That's how people look at it. But now I'm in a society where I have to embrace that. I take all that on in order to survive. So I had to, I had to start my life all over again. But people kept reminding me, say, Gary, people want to see your artwork. You just, I understand you want to concentrate on your life, but remember, you got a quilt in the African American Museum in Washington, D.C. You got a quilt in New Orleans Historical Museum, and people want to see your work. And I start making excuses. Well, I don't have a place. I don't have a place. But you know what? People got together. They started a GoFundMe program and raised the money for me to get a studio. Then I said, well, I don't have any equipment, any material. Next thing you know, I start getting boxes of material. I start getting sewing machines and everything. And I knew that I could make quilts because you never lose it. But I didn't want to go back to making this, you could say, the same kind of quilts I was making. I wanted to make quilts that would speak to the people. Mm-hmm. Understand? I want to make quilts where people can see the moving parts. So I wanted to do something that's provocative. So, but I was always told your greatest asset is yourself. And I was saying, what could I do to really get people's attention? And something told me, say, people know about your story, but they don't know about your life in prison. Mm. So how are you going to go about that? Making quotes that reflect your life in prison. That's when I started doing self-imagery of myself in prison. And that's one of the things that you see on the book. Mm-hmm. That 16-year-old kid at the time, all right? And later, he with dreadlocks, you understand, people up among the bars, that's me. Yeah.
No, right on. So listen, just before we end up closing out, I can't help but want to ask that we just are getting over or still reeling from the news of the passing of Assata Shakur, who
Yes.
at least got to live out her days in relative freedom after having escaped. And previously we've interviewed people like Russell Maroon Schultz, who talked, in his last memoir about, there's one powerful part that I always think about, which was specific to this idea of escape. Of course, he got his name from repeated escape attempts, but he spoke of an attitude of decades past where he felt like there was an expectation that people in the movement would try to free political prisoners or do more to in the language of today, become abolitionists.
Yeah.
And then just listening to you talk about your story, given all that context and the people that you ended up working with, could you talk a little bit about what was it like inside to consider, witness others, or discuss even among yourselves attempts to escape? What role did that play, or did it play at all? Because for those of us who only experience this indirectly through media or other stories, you've already touched on one aspect of the nightmare that we're often encouraged to believe is part of the process, but we don't often hear about attempts or discussions of attempts at escape. And you were in, for long enough to have been in when other attempts were happening, and you were with other, members of the Black Panther Party who had their own, I'm sure, discussions and analyses of what was happening. So I was just curious, if you would want to say anything about Asada or anyone else, and but also, if you could share anything about just what it was like to consider, or the realities from inside considering escape.
All right, I definitely would like to, you can say, express my profound, condolences about the loss of the sister Asada, because during the time of my incident, that's when things was going on with Asada herself, and I celebrated the escape. I felt that it was freedom. It was the presence that broke house. Understand that they did the righteous thing, because we knew how the trial went. They wanted her. They wanted this. They wanted to convict her. They wanted to punish her. They wanted to do everything they can. The whole system itself. And I feel that she's gonna be missed, but she's gonna always live in the hearts and minds of a lot of people, not only here in America but also around the world. And that she's a champion. She's a leader. She's someone that stood on her conviction, and we should never ever forget that. And what she always said, power to the people. That she lived and she died believing in what she fought for and what she stood for. And the brothers, those in prison, I'm gonna tell you, the worst thing that happened, the worst time of the year for guys in prison is the holidays. That's when escape goes up. That's when guys go to, using drugs. They use the whole kind of stuff for escapism, all right? Because the memories of being there with the family during Thanksgiving and Christmas and stuff like that, and now they're being deprived of this, and it's hard for them to mentally deal with it. So what they do, they do things to, like, prison, prison hooch, as they call it, or they may do drugs, or they may isolate themselves. They may try to escape, you know? So it's a thing where to try to deal with all of that. And I felt that I had a responsibility, not only for myself, but I knew one thing, that I was innocent. And I had many opportunities of leaving the prison, but I also knew I had an obligation to the men in the prison, because the privilege that I was afforded, many other men were afforded the same thing. And if it just only take one to mess up for everybody else, understand? And I didn't want to be that one. I didn't want to be that one, because I led by example and people respected me. And I knew one day that I was going to walk out that gate as a free man, but not as a fugitive, not as an escapee, and I felt it was my obligation to help educate the men, to prepare them for society when they eventually is released from prison, and besides, I had a chance to escape in the early years, because I left that Paris jail, as it mentioned in the book. But I believed in the system. But I was young, I was immature, and I didn't take the matter as seriously as I should have. And if I did, I probably would have been somewhere in Cuba, Angola, uh, somewhere in Africa. I would have been there. But that wasn't the route that I took. And when I was in New Orleans for 8.5 months after after Katrina, I had freedom of movement. People didn't know that I was a prisoner. I worked among law enforcement. I worked among the National Guards, army people out in New Orleans during Katrina. And you know what? They thought I was one of them. They thought I was in law enforcement. But when they found out that I was a prisoner, it didn't change their attitude toward me because they got to know me as a human being. And they always look forward to seeing me when we arrived in New Orleans. You know, we was at the annex, New Orleans Police Annex, and out there in the city. And the guy walked out, and the guy said, "Man, are y'all from Angola?" And the guy said, "Yeah, we from Angola." And they said, "You know a brother named Gary Tyler?" And I said, "Yes, I know that brother quite well." He said, "You do?" I just said, "Yeah, man, that's my friend. I know him quite well." And the guy that was with me, Turtle, he was looking at me. They said, "Man, when you see the brother, tell the brother that those of us in New Orleans, man, we still support him, bro. We love him, bro. We want him out of prison." I said, "You know what? I'm going to let that brother know that when I go back to Angola." He said, "Yeah, man, let him know. Let him know that, man, that we're in New Orleans, we love him." And after the guy left, the guy turned and said, "Man, you cold-blooded." I said, "What you mean?" He said, "Man, man, that man asked about you. Why you tell me?" I said, "No, Turtle, sometimes it's always best to maintain your anonymity. Because if I would have told him who I was, can you imagine the number of people that would have showed up?" I said, "No." I said, I didn't want to do that, brother. You know? So I wanted to keep low because I was in New Orleans for humanitarian reasons, because that was a tragedy that happened out there in the city, and I wanted to do my due diligence to make sure that we play a part as prisoners to help out in that city itself. So
No, right on. Thank you, Mr. Tyler. Thank you.
yes, you're right.
Well, Mr. Tyler, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story and get us all teary-eyed. And
Well, it wasn't
yeah,
my intention.
I know, but
I speaks from the heart, though.
I appreciate, we have to exercise our humanity across the board, and that's what it's about.
Yeah, yes,
They can take so much from us, but our humanity stays intact. So
it does.
I really do appreciate it. I can't find words to express my appreciation that you are here with
Yeah,
us in this way and in so many other ways. And I ask the spirit of life to ensure that you live long and prosper,
well,
and
thank
continue to
you.
create beautiful art,
Well,
and
thank
be as free, however you define that. But thank you so
you.
much,
Yes.
brother. Appreciate
Yes,
you.
All right,
indeed.
then.
Thank you very much.
All right, then. Appreciate it. Y'all have a good day.
You
You
too.
too,
Take
brother.
care.
We'll be in touch. Take
Yes,
good
All
care.
right,
indeed.
most definitely do that.
All right.
All right.
Thank
Peace.
you.
Bye.
Peace be with you.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.